Good morning or good afternoon, wherever it is in the world you are joining us. Thank you so much for joining StriveScan and Cachet's virtual college exploration program. We are focusing on STEM programs in the next 2 days and a few housekeeping items before we begin with today's panel. First and foremost, you're encouraged to ask questions throughout today's panel via the Q&A button that you see on your screen. When you submit a question, it gets sent to all of our panelists and they will work to answer the question during the session and at the conclusion of the session. They may not get to every question during this 45-minute session, but they will receive a transcript of every question to follow up as well. If you have a question about a specific institution, please make sure to indicate that in your question. So rather than saying, what is your campus community like? Maybe target it to, hey, Kettering University, I'm interested in your campus community. So make sure you indicate that in your question. As a reminder, your camera and your microphone are turned off. The panelists cannot see or hear you. So if you do have questions, make sure to type it in through that Q&A. This is one of 50 information sessions and panel presentations that are being offered, and these are through tomorrow evening. You can register for all the additional sessions at strivescan.com/virtual/STEM. WPI and Drexel University already did their individual information session, and those recordings can be found at strivescan.com/virtual/STEM. The exact same place you went to register for today, you can view a recording of the WPI and Drexel University session. Kettering University is presenting individually tomorrow, so they've got 45 minutes dedicated just to Kettering, and you can sign up for that session at that exact same website. When you signed up today, you received a barcode. You do not need that barcode for this virtual event. And again, recordings are all made available at the same place you registered. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our awesome panelists.
Great, thank you. All right. Excellent. Well, welcome again, everybody. Today we have a session on learning beyond the classroom. My name is Liza Laurent. I'm a Senior Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at WPI, or Worcester Polytechnic Institute.
Yes, and I'm Bree Baker. I'm an admissions counselor at Kettering University, located in Flint, Michigan.
And my name is Jill Sweeney. I am an Assistant Director of Admissions at Drexel University, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Perfect. So just for everybody to know what we plan to cover in the next 43 minutes or so is we really want to take a look at how schools are enhancing the learning environment beyond the classroom. And that really happens in three major facets that we'll cover today. The one that Jill and Drexel will talk about is the study abroad experience and taking that learning environment really on what you would think of on a traditional scale outside of the classroom. But then Kettering's going to talk about, and Bree's going to talk about internships and co-ops and how learning in those opportunities is yet another way of outside of the classroom environment for students. And finally, I'll talk about project-based learning and really how it's a nice blend between those two and how other schools are moving to a project-based learning environment and curriculum. So I'll turn it over to Jill now to talk about her slides.
Thank you so much, Eliza. That was a great introduction. And I think one thing I like to touch on too is I think a lot of people, we think of college as an opportunity to learn, gain knowledge, get involved, make friends, and make connections. But for a lot of people, they see college as an opportunity to help them get a job after graduation. One thing though that I want to kind of touch on is these things we're going to talk about today are really opportunities that will help you get a job after graduation because they'll give you these skills listed here, but a lot of employers value today. The ability to problem solve, flexibility, maturity, having solid communication skills. A lot of employers are going to be focusing more on these skills in their potential employees, more so than did you get an A in that statistics class, or did you get a C+ in that statistics class? And a lot of these opportunities are going to give you these skills. The first being study abroad. So in a study conducted by the University of Maryland, they actually found that studying abroad really gave students these skills for a significant population. It helped increase their maturity, their self-confidence, helped them learn to tolerate ambiguity, and really gave them a broader worldview. So for those of you who aren't familiar, studying abroad is an opportunity for you to live, work, and/or study in a foreign country during your college experience. So you're actually leaving your campus community. You're leaving Flint, Michigan, Worcester, Massachusetts, or Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to actually go to another region of the world to live, work, study, and really immerse yourself in that culture. And again, it gives you these skills that a lot of employers will value. There's a lot of different types of study abroad opportunities, and I'll touch on a couple of those different types today. The one we're most familiar with is kind of the traditional program, which is actually where you study abroad for a full term. So rather than studying, for example, at WPI or Kettering or Drexel for that semester or term, you're actually going to study at a foreign college or university. Now, there's a lot of variation in these traditional programs. There are homestay programs where you'll actually live with an Italian family or a Vietnamese family. There are programs that are through organized or established universities. So for example, maybe you'll study at the University of Leeds or the University of Beijing. There are programs where rather than it being established university, it's actually a program specifically for students who are studying abroad. So for example, there's a program in Copenhagen, Denmark called the Danish Institute for Study Abroad, specifically for American students who want to study abroad for a term in Copenhagen, Denmark. One type of program you might be familiar with is an exchange program, because your high school might have a program like this. This is where you would go abroad to a foreign country and a student from that country will come to your university. So the exchange or a switch. With these traditional programs, you're going to just be taking classes in that foreign country, getting involved, getting engaged, and having a college experience similar to like what you would do back here in the US. The difference being that you're in Europe, Africa, or Asia. If that full term abroad program really isn't for you, but you're still interested in global engagement, there are other ways you can study abroad. There are short-term programs or intensive courses. These are typically 1 to 4 weeks in length, and they're usually associated around a topic. So for an example, at Drexel, we have a program on criminology and justice studies in Scandinavia. Students will spend that term learning about the criminal justice system in Scandinavia. At the end of the term, they actually go to Norway and Sweden for 2 weeks and they visit prisons and they learn about the criminal justice system there. So it's a bit of a shorter abroad experience. There are consulting residencies. So these are similar to intensive courses, the difference being rather than maybe visiting prisons, you're actually consulting with a foreign business. So again, another Drexel program that we offer that's similar to this is that our students will maybe spend the term doing consulting work for an olive oil company in Italy and then spend a week in Italy actually working at the company. There are service trips. So service trips are an opportunity where you'll go to a foreign country and actually do community service for an established period of time. Maybe you'll be establishing clean water in Guatemala. Maybe you'll be going to China or South Korea and teaching students English. So this is an opportunity for you to integrate community service, but to do it in a different setting if you're interested. There are research programs. So research programs are an opportunity for you to actually do research in another country around the world. So rather than doing research on campus at Kettering or Drexel or WPI, maybe you're going to be doing research in Antarctica or in Ghana or in Russia for that full term. And then of course there are co-ops and internships abroad as well, where you're actually working in a foreign country. And I'm going to turn it over to Bree, who's going to talk a bit more about what co-ops and internships are.
Yes, thank you, Jill. That's really great information about study abroad. I had the opportunity to study abroad my junior year of college in Peru, and my only regret was I did 4 weeks. I wish I would have done a full semester. But we have great questions coming in, so keep those going and we'll answer those at the end. But as Jill mentioned, study abroad is a fantastic way for students to become more well-rounded and more prepared for life after college. And another really great opportunity that students have to learn outside the classroom is through cooperative education or co-ops and internships. So if you ask any person in any field, where did you learn the most about your job? They're probably going to tell you on the job, actually doing the work. So sitting in the classroom and listening to lectures, reading the books, that's all really important, but the magic happens when you apply it to something. So, and along with that, several employers are expecting students to graduate with some sort of relevant work experience related to the field that they're going into. And co-ops and internships are the perfect way to display that skill set and to kind of get a leg up on everybody else who's graduating from college. So I always like to point out the difference between co-ops and internships, because a lot of times people use them interchangeably, but there are some really key differences to know which opportunity would best suit you in your college experience. So most notably would be the types of projects that you work on in co-ops or internships. So co-ops, they're a little bit more extensive and they're a little more structured than internships as far as the projects and daily tasks that you'll be assigned. So during a co-op, a student will work full-time. So you're working 40 hours a week. Co-ops are really great for students who have a pretty good idea of what field they want to go into after graduation. Whereas an internship, it's a little bit shorter. They can be full-time or they can be part-time, just kind of depends on the company. And internships are better if you're not so sure what you want to go into and you want to explore a couple different things within a company. So when you think co-op, I want you to think of depth, right? It's an in-depth experience. Where internship, it's a little bit more breadth. That's probably one of the key differences. And as I touched on just a little bit, a time commitment can be a very big key differentiator between co-ops and internships. So co-ops typically last longer. They can last anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. It just kind of depends on the institution and the company that you're at. So as an example, I put Kettering University. I have our academic calendar up in the yellow there. So our co-op is actually required for all students and they can start their freshman year, and we divide the student body up into two. So A section, they go to school for 3 months and then they co-op for 3 months, go to school for 3 months, co-op. B section, they can start their co-op first and they follow this 3 month on, 3 month off pattern. Drexel had a really good, a very good graphic as well. I should mention, so Kettering, we are a 5-year institution. So that's one thing, because co-ops are more extensive, it may add time onto your graduation, onto your college experience. So Drexel, I have their graphic up here. So they actually have it where you can do one co-op and they do it for a 6-month period, your junior year. And that will keep you within that four-year graduation. Or you can go for the 3 co-op option where you actually do 18 months of co-op, and that would extend your time to 5 years. So that could be something to consider if you're like hard set, I need to get out in a certain amount of time. That's something to consider. Where internships, aside from co-ops, are a little bit more flexible. A lot of times they're offered in the summer months. So you'll actually just spend your summer doing that internship. As mentioned earlier, they could be full-time or they could be part-time as well. So a lot of times students, if they're doing part-time, they'll actually be taking classes while they do their internship too. And that kind of allows the students to still be involved in their campus community activities. If that's something that's important to you, that college life, an internship could be the way to go. And then kind of going off of that, because of the time that you are committed to a co-op or internship, it could really change the possibility of locations where you conduct these experiences. So a lot of times students who pursue internships, they may stay a little bit closer to home or closer to their college town, so they can continue to be involved in classes and campus activities. Because co-ops do range from 3 to 12 months, there could be a possibility for you to explore opportunities outside of your hometown or college town. So there are companies across the nation and even overseas that are looking for college students to fill these co-op positions. And much like study abroad, some institutions do offer the international co-op opportunities. And this allows you to develop language skills, develop understandings for different cultures, meaningful work experience in an international setting, and an opportunity, again, to grow individually. So again, that can depend if you really want to try out an area and you're like, I'm stuck in Michigan, but California sounds cool. It seems more feasible to do that for a longer period of time than just doing it for a month or so. And then because co-op students are in such high demand and companies are looking for students to gain this experience, employers are becoming a lot more competitive in their recruiting efforts for co-ops. So co-op positions are typically paid. I know at Kettering, our freshmen start at about $16 an hour, and it does go up about $1 every year. And that does depend too on your location, where you're employed, cost of living, all of that. And employers may include additional benefits because you're there for an extended period of time. So they may provide housing stipends, travel stipends, paid time off, overtime pay. Some offer health insurance. I've heard on a rare occasion, some companies, they'll allow students to start a 401k or even be involved in company profit sharing. It just really depends on the company culture that you're getting into. And remember too, these are opportunities that they're looking for you to fit in, and a lot of times it leads to a really good chance of you being hired even before you graduate. And internships kind of, they're similar in that path where you establish a relationship. But with internships, they may be paid or unpaid. A lot of times it just depends on your employer and the type of industry that you're looking into. And because internships are employed for such a short period of time, they typically aren't offered additional benefits. And then finally, graduation requirements. Many STEM colleges and universities, including the 3 on this panel today, either require or strongly recommend co-ops for you to partake in a co-op during your college experience. And just remember, you don't pay tuition during a co-op. Whereas internships, they're not often required for graduation, and sometimes you may be required to pay per credit hour for that to show up on your transcript. So that's always something to keep in mind too. And most universities, they do have resources to help you jumpstart your co-op or internship experience, whether it's through career services, career development centers. Most universities put on employment fairs, and a lot of these schools already have established relationships with employers. And those employers are looking at schools as a feeder, right, to kind of get those students in the door and interested in that company. So all in all, each college is a little bit different, and it's important to discuss these possibilities with an academic advisor, career advisor, your admissions counselor as possible, so you can fit it into your schedule and make sure you stay on that graduation schedule. Thank you. And then I talked a little bit about Kettering already. This is my shameless plug just to make sure that you tune in tomorrow at 1 p.m. We'd love to have you there. And if you have any questions afterwards, I'm happy to answer those as well. But I'm going to go over and turn it over to Eliza.
Great, thanks guys. So we've talked about study abroad, we've talked about internships and co-ops, and kind of the third component that I mentioned from the get-go was this concept of project-based learning. And I just want to briefly define project-based learning, because it can be as simple as just completing a project in lieu of taking a test. But the way that kind of at WPI, we define it as really a curriculum built around project work where students are guided rather than directed by faculty. And they're really problem solving and very open-ended problems in real tangible examples. So it really is a hybrid between what both Bree and Jill have talked about. So, Jill opened up talking about some of the skills that you're capturing out of a study abroad experience. And the same could go for Bree in terms of talking about co-op and internships. But ultimately, taking your learning outside of the classroom, whether it be in study abroad, internships, or a project-based learning environment, really is developing those softer skills. So collaboration, project management, how do you communicate with students outside of your major field of study? If I am a chemical engineer, I might have a project where I'm working with a biologist and a computer science major. And the idea behind this is that you're not meant to be an expert in the project that you're working on, but you're working on developing these softer skills and coming up with a deliverable, which is why having these experiences outside the classroom make you all that more tangible and exciting for employers, because leadership and collaboration and communication, those are all hard skills to teach. But through all of these experiences, you're gaining them really very, very organically and very naturally just through the process that you're going through to work through a particular part of your educational career outside of that traditional classroom setting. So a little bit about WPI and how we weave projects into our curriculum. We are truly a project-based STEM university. So we have 3 core projects that every student has to complete for graduation. And you can complete them on a global scale, so you can complete them overseas. But we like to describe these projects as essentially internships on steroids. So kind of what Bree was talking about, but we can also do them on a global scale. We have over 45 project centers all over the world on 6 different continents. So students, unlike in a study abroad program, aren't taking classes there. They're really going there to work a full-time job while they're there, getting 3 classes worth of credit for their time there. And I just wanted to give you one example to really make this a tangible component, which I think is always helpful. But a group of students were working on their senior year research project, and they were working with an actual turtle. Her name was Lola. And Lola worked with the Key West Aquarium. That was their project sponsor. And it was a group of biomedical engineering students and mechanical engineering students. And the problem that they were faced with was that Lola had lost one of her flippers in an accident, and she needed a prosthetic flipper in order to survive. And so it might sound simple enough, like, oh, you can just like tape an extra flipper on Lola's body, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. They needed to do the research on how sea turtles live and what kind of environment Lola was going to be going back to, and what kind of material would be sufficient for Lola to survive. So I'm going to show you a 1 minute and 30-second clip just to give you an understanding of how you can take project-based learning to the next level, really.
Well, Lola's been a willing participant, and with the help of the technology at WPI, we've come up with a new flipper design that'll allow her to have a normal life.
Lola came to us back in 2007 from the Dallas World Aquarium in Dallas, Texas. She was an amputee, missing her right flipper. As a tank mate here at the aquarium, she pretty much swam around in circles without that flipper, made it very difficult for her. Watching Lola over the years swim around in the tanks and pretty much just stay at the bottom, not moving around that much, is actually kind of sad to watch, because these turtles out in the ocean swim freely and they have the ability to move so gracefully. She didn't.
We deal with sea turtle injuries all the time, and in fact, flipper injuries are the most common. Entanglements with fishing gear, shark bites, or boat strikes from recreational boaters. And so, although these animals do okay with missing one flipper, and technically they're allowed to be released if they're otherwise healthy, not uncommon to see animals come in with 2 flippers missing, and unfortunately those animals are euthanized. Well, with this design, next time we get in a double amputee, we can attach 2 flippers, and instead of euthanizing that endangered species, we can find a home for it and that animal can live on for people to appreciate.
This prosthetic flipper that's going to be pretty much fitted on her stub may just give her that ability to swim straight, be able to swim more comfortably. Hopefully, now with this prosthetic, we may have some hope for Lola in the future.
So the idea behind the project-based learning environment is taking a real life problem, taking your learning from a traditional classroom setting. And, you know, there's so few times, and we've talked about this throughout our time this afternoon, but there's so few times that you're having to say, oh, what did you get on this exam? You know, how do you solve X, Y, or Z problem set? But taking the knowledge that you've learned in the classroom and being able to apply it outside of the classroom, whether it be in project-based learning, whether it be through co-op and internships, whether it be through your time to study abroad, really is giving you a leg up to allow you to become very situational focused and not just worrying about the grade that you're receiving, but rather the foundation of the education that you have to build upon. So that is what we have to share with all of you. Bree is going to help us manage some of the Q&A, and she's going to fire off some questions for all of us to answer as we see fit. Bree, you got some to throw at us right now?
I do, yes, and keep them coming. So the first question, the first few questions are related to study abroad. So how long should one study abroad to get the full experience? 1 year, 6 months? And then do you have to learn a language to study abroad?
So those are great questions. And I don't think there's really any, for the first question, how long, I don't think there's really any right answer. I think it really depends on you as a person and what works best for you. So I know Bree mentioned that she studied abroad when she was in college. I also studied abroad. I did it for a term. A term felt pretty comfortable for me. But I had friends who spent a full year in Belgium. I had friends who spent 6 months in Thailand, and I had friends who spent like 2 weeks abroad. So it really kind of depends on your comfort level and what kind of makes the most sense for you. I don't know, Bree, if you want to weigh in on kind of, or anyone else wants to weigh in on kind of the length of time or their own experiences here.
Oh, we lost Bree.
We lost Bree.
She'll be back. Yeah, I think you're right, Jill. I don't think there really is a set amount of time. I think for many students, it's understanding the necessary requirements that you have for your particular major too. You know, if there's certain classes that you need and they're only offered in certain semesters or certain quarters in WPI speak, you know, just planning ahead as best as possible to make sure that you can still get those kind of on-campus classes that you would need, I think would be an important thing to remember.
That's a great note, Eliza. And something else I always recommend for students too is I mentioned those intensive courses or those short programs. If you can do one of those, maybe your first year or your second year at college, give it a try and see if you like it. It might be a good idea to test out the waters. And if you find yourself with those 2 weeks saying, wow, I really enjoyed this experience, I want to do more, or I think I could do longer, then you kind of know that maybe you can look into a term abroad or a year-long abroad program.
And the other follow-up question to that was, do you have to learn a language?
It depends. That's very program specific with the language. So there are some programs where you do have to learn a foreign language. There are some programs where you do not. So I know, for example, at Drexel, we have programs in Germany, and they are taught at a university in Germany. So you have to speak fluent German, because if you're taking classes in German and you don't speak the language, you really are putting yourself in a difficult situation. But there are also some programs where, for example, maybe you're going to the UK or Australia where the language is English anyway, or maybe you're going to the American University in Paris. In those cases, you don't need to know a foreign language. So it really depends on the program, and it's something you'll want to talk to your own individual study abroad office and that college about, just to get that information before you go.
Bree. Welcome back, Bree.
Sorry, I got booted. I don't know if somebody else
okay.
can take over the Q&A because
Yeah, no problem. So
thank you. Sorry.
yeah, so one other question that I see in there, and I think it's a great one, is, you know, how can high schoolers take their learning outside of the classroom during a pandemic? And I mean, I'll start by saying, learning outside of the classroom doesn't need to be for credit. It doesn't need to be something driven by a school. We've seen a lot of examples, at least in the Worcester area, where students have reached out to local churches and to hospitals to understand how they might be able to better serve. You know, for some people, they needed a better way to develop scheduling of appointments. So if you can't have a lot of people in at a given time and you need contact tracing, maybe you're somebody who knows some HTML or you do a little coding on the side. You know, learning outside of the classroom can be something like developing a website for an organization to use for scheduling of appointments, or maybe you have a 3D printer at your house and you want to design some face shields for your local hospital. So learning outside of the classroom doesn't need to be academic driven. It can be really you asking the questions and trying to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve and coming up with a solution. And that would be my best advice, at least during all of this kookiness that we are living through right now.
And kind of going off of that, it's a good idea to look at your extracurricular activities just as a starting point. You know, if you're involved in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, I've seen people do amazing things in DECA, HOSA, and if you're just like, I don't even know where to begin, that can kind of help guide you on where you can get started.
So there's a specific question for Kettering here. One of the huge advantages one of your huge advantages is internships and co-ops. But how can you be assured that you will be matched for these multiple times throughout the year?
That's a really great question, and one that we get often. So at Kettering University, you really start your co-op search as soon as you're an accepted student. You don't even have to be committed to Kettering. We host a couple different events like our admitted student program where you learn who your co-op manager is. Your co-op manager is based off of territories, so we have different regions that we work with. And then you learn about resume writing, interview skills, and then how to navigate our employment fair. So we host a really big employment fair in March for all incoming students. Like I said, you don't even have to be committed to Kettering to get started. And so from there, a lot of students, some companies will conduct on-site interviews that day. Others will take those resumes, they'll look through them and then contact students at a later date. But really the biggest way students receive co-ops is through co-op manager referrals. So we have companies who reach out to us and they say, hey, I'm looking for a computer science major freshman, A section, who do you have? And we'll send a blast of resumes out to that employer, and then the student will be contacted. So the biggest thing is co-op is required for all students to graduate at Kettering. You need at least 5 terms to graduate, but the average student will get 7 to 9. And so we have so many resources on campus to help you with that. And the idea is that hopefully, your freshman year, you find a company, it's a great fit, and you stay there for the remainder of your time. But if another opportunity comes up, it's not quite a good fit, we help you through that entire process to find another co-op. And with the current situation, what's happening, with COVID-19, there was a lot of concern about, laying off co-op students and doing things like that. And there are a lot of ways that we've pivoted to help with that. We have had a lot of co-op employers that have been really excited, and they've sent their students to work from home and stay involved that way. But we've adapted to help students, if they're having a rough time, what can you do on campus to get some credit for co-op? Or how can we look at outside work too and help that become relevant work experience? So we do have tons of resources on campus to make sure that you are successful, and you will be successful. And I can say out of my students, 100% of them did have a co-op position by the time they reached their sophomore year status. So don't worry about that too much. And just the earlier you get started, the more effort you put forth too, the better your chances are of finding something.
And Jill, just as Bree was talking about kind of internships and co-ops during COVID, I was wondering, there's a question related to all of our opportunities during the pandemic, and how are we supporting students who want to partake in any of those outside of their learning opportunities? And I can speak to our projects, but I didn't know, Jill, if you could speak to study abroad opportunities and what's happening at Drexel right now with COVID.
Sure. So, this is definitely a difficult time and a little challenging for studying abroad at the current moment. One nice thing I do think for Drexel is there are some schools where you have to study abroad during a certain time in your career. So I know, like the institution I attended as an undergraduate, you had to study abroad in your junior year. However, that's not the case at all schools. And at Drexel, you can study abroad at any time in your curriculum that makes the most sense. So if studying abroad makes the most sense in junior year, go for it. Then we have students who study abroad their first year, their second year. So for students who are concerned about, really want that abroad experience and are nervous about, oh, I don't know if I can fit it in the next year, they have other opportunities. It's not something that they need to do right this second. They can do when the world is a little bit safer to travel with. But I do think there are so many opportunities for students to really still have a global experience, even from the comfort of home, that it's not too much of a concern for our students at this time.
Yeah, and same goes for our projects. So most of our projects they all have really an ability for students to complete a project at one of our project centers, which is you know, at one of our 45 different project locations all around the globe or on campus. And for those students that were slated to go away in the spring, they actually had to pivot, obviously, and complete their project work on campus. They worked with their project sponsors to be able to do remote work. And we unfortunately don't have students traveling abroad for our first 2 quarters of this academic year for obvious reasons, but they're still going to be able to complete their project work with their project sponsor, just might have to pivot their project work. So the hope is that we'll be able to get students back out there as soon as possible. It's not any of our intentions to prevent that experience from any student. We have to be mindful of the global pandemic. So great question though. There's another question about studying abroad. Jill, I'm going to turn this to you. If studying abroad, does the school pay for housing? And if you go to school abroad, do you have to pay for your home university and your abroad university? So kind of some logistical questions there.
Sure. So typically you're not going to be paying double tuition. Typically you're not going to be paying tuition to attend WPI or Drexel or Kettering and to attend that college abroad. You'll be paying, it depends on the school and it depends on the program. So it is program specific. There are some programs where, for example, you'll pay your tuition directly to Drexel and that money is then transferred over to the university that you're studying at. There are some schools that I know of where, you know, maybe you'll just pay tuition, but you still have to pay for, so maybe you'll pay your tuition to Drexel, but you have to provide your own housing. So maybe you have to find an apartment in Paris, or maybe you have to find an apartment in Seoul, South Korea for the term. So it really depends on the program, and it even depends on the country you're going to. So I know, like, for example, when I was in college and I studied abroad, my tuition, so what I paid to the college I attended, covered my room and board, it covered my tuition, it covered 2 trips that I had while I was overseas. However, I had friends though who went to other countries and they, you know, paid their tuition to the school, but they still had to find their own housing and they didn't have that kind of stipend or anything. And I got a food stipend too, so I got a lot. But I had students who didn't get that food stipend, who didn't get the trip. So it depends on the country. It depends on the program and it depends on the school. Typically though, you're not paying double tuition. Something else, this is a little in the weeds, but there are different types of programs and there are programs that are through your college and then there are programs that are independent. So if a program is through your college, what that means is essentially you're acting exactly like if you were going to Drexel for that term, you're just not on Drexel's campus. You're studying in another country, all those credits you've earned are going to transfer right back to Drexel and they're going to fulfill your graduation requirements. An independent program is something you're doing on your own. So you're going to essentially not be paying tuition to Drexel. You're paying tuition for that specific program. The credits you've earned at that school may or may not transfer neatly back over to Drexel. They might be considered elective credits. They might not fulfill the graduation requirements. So you might still, you know, get recognized for earning those classes, but you might still have to come back and take that philosophy class or take that engineering class. So it's important to make that distinction when you're looking at schools and you're researching programs, asking the abroad office, is this through the school or is this independent? And do I have to, as independent suggests, do the whole thing on my own?
Great. And speaking of tuition, Bree, I'm hoping this is a pretty straightforward one for you, but if a student is off on co-op, are they still paying tuition?
No, they will not be paying tuition on their co-op term.
So you're not paying for 5 years of tuition at Kettering.
And I think in general too, for co-ops, the money you make is yours to spend however you like. If you want to put it towards tuition, we highly recommend it, but it's your money.
Yep, great. And there's some questions for me about kind of projects and some of how topics are divided, I'll give you a really brief synopsis. So most WPI students are completing a project their junior year and one their senior year. Those are the two biggest projects. The junior year project is interdisciplinary, so you're working on a project outside of your major on something completely unrelated to your major with students outside of your major, very intentionally. And most oftentimes students are picking based on topic or project type. So if you're somebody who's really interested in doing something within a local community or within a museum system, or maybe you want to work on an environmentally focused project, you can pick based on topic. When it comes to your senior year project, that's major specific. So the example of Lola was actually a joint project between biomedical engineering students and mechanical engineering students. But we have, you know, if you're a robotics engineer, you'd be solely working on a particular robotics engineering project, or if you're a biologist, so on and so forth. And most of the projects are around 3 to 5 students. So they are small scale in terms of the group size that you're working with, but that's kind of the type of environment and how projects are divided up. So there's another question about, let's see, what do we have? We have about 5 minutes left. Can an international student expect to receive scholarship or any form of tuition benefit by participating in co-ops? Bree. Unmute yourself, Bree.
Everything's all over the place. So scholarships, as far as specifically related to international and co-op, we don't have something related to that. So you could get merit scholarship to come in. International co-ops here in the US can be a little tricky. We typically have students, they have to do 2 back-to-back academic terms before we can have them move on to co-op. And that's really just a lot of paperwork and things that are involved with that process. But as far as scholarship related directly to co-op, no, but you would still get paid. That answers it.
Great. And then there's a question for Jill. How are the classes so small with such a large, relatively speaking, for a mid-sized school population? So how do you keep your classes small at Drexel?
Sure. 2 ways. One, we have a lot of professors, or a lot of people teaching classes. So more professors means that we can split up into smaller classes. The second thing I always touch on too is that, so we're on that co-op school, and as Bree showed in that graphic, essentially half of our population, or half the class, is going to be on co-op and the other half is going to be on class. So if you think about it, for example, maybe our sophomore class is around 3,000 students. I think it's a little more. But think about it as 1,500 students are going to be on co-op, 1,500 students are on class. So because we are technically a larger school, but half of our student population is going to be working and not in the classroom, it allows us to have those smaller class sizes too.
Great. And does anybody know if NCAA prohibits a student athlete from participating in co-op? I don't know.
They do not. No. So they can actually still take part in co-op.
Yeah.
They more work with, I will say that they more work with the student to make sure that they're going on co-op on an off term.
Right.
So for example, if they play basketball, they're going to be on co-op in the spring or the summer or the fall rather than in the winter when they're training.
Great. Okay.
We don't have collegiate sports, so we don't run into
gosh.
the issue.
Well, yeah, we do. We're Division III, and our students, we offer co-ops at WPI as well. And our co-ops, our athletes can complete co-op. They also have the ability to complete their project work in and outside of the country. So no restrictions there. I think the same would hold true if you were a D1 school or a D2 school, but I think we're all D3. Yeah, okay. So, Drexel's D1. Great. There you go. And there's a couple really specific questions in the queue that are ironically specific for WPI, and I will take those offline and answer those separately. But one last question, I guess, kind of closing thoughts, since we're down to 1 minute left. What would be one piece of advice that you would give to students going through their search process right now? Go. Oh, Bree, okay, I'll start. Bree, oh, there she goes. Okay, go.
I guess one piece of advice is, I know things are kind of crazy right now, and I always say visit any campus that you can before committing. You know, that's where you're going to spend your most time. So right now, take advantage of any virtual visits that you can, gather as much information, see how people are handling the situation, what's going on, and that would be my piece of advice.
My advice is, I know this is a stressful time. Don't get too stressed out about it. We know it's a difficult time. Reach out to us with questions, concerns. We are happy to help. You can see we're really friendly and nice. So help us out in any way that you can. Reach out to us for any information you can. And like Bree said, just, you know, take an opportunity to do some research. And I think we lost Eliza.
All right. Zach.
Liza, do you have your final tips?
No, I was just going to say, my screen cut out. I would just say, you know, try and get access to current students as best you can, even on a virtual level, to get those questions answered. That's going to be your most kind of honest and truthful.
Looks like Eliza's having some technical difficulties. Oh, there we go. Well, thank you so much, panelists. Very anticlimactic ending of a little frantic session, but that's okay. This was really great information. And as Jill said, these are all friendly, nice people. So please use them as you're navigating the college search process. Students and counselors, thank you so much for joining this session. We encourage you to fill out the survey via the box that will show up when you close today's window. And we encourage you to also sign up for additional sessions at strivescan.com/virtual/STEM. Kettering's session is tomorrow, correct, Bree? Awesome. All right, and the recording of all these sessions can be made available and they'll be up on our website shortly after. So thanks everyone, have a great day.
Thank you.